Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking you on a really incredible sonic journey.
We absolutely are.
Yeah, we're looking at the life and work of a musician who is just fundamentally rewiring the architecture of contemporary music. If you've been paying any attention to the global jazz landscape over the past decade or so, you definitely know the name.
Nubya Garcia.
Exactly. Born in 1991, she has essentially become the central pillar, the architect, really, of the 21st century London jazz renaissance.
It is a massive shift to witness in real time.
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking about an artist who took a genre that sometimes gets, trapped in its own historical reverence and just forcibly dragged it onto a pulsing modern dance floor.
And she did it all without losing a single ounce of the harmonic complexity that defines the jazz tradition.
Right. Which is incredibly hard to do.
It really is. And to understand exactly how she pulled that off, we are pulling from a really rich stack of sources today. We've got these fantastic biographical excerpts titled Architect of the Modern London Jazz Renaissance.
Which map out her cultural and educational timeline so well.
They really do. And alongside that, we are leaning heavily on the show notes, the graphics, and the musical analysis from Season 3, Episode 49 of the Saxophone Knowledge and Mastery podcast.
Yeah, they framed her career trajectory as a tenor saxophone odyssey.
Which, honestly, is the perfect lens for us today.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission for this deep dive is to uncover how Garcia merges this rigorous classical and jazz conservatoire training with this undeniable, massive, global club energy.
And we really want to extract some insights on how embracing your roots can completely revolutionize your craft, no matter what field you're in.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you'd probably assume an architect of the tenor sax just picked up the horn at age 5 and never looked back.
Right. That's the standard prodigy myth.
But growing up in Camden, London, her early instrumental progression was actually a completely different beast entirely. She didn't start with brass or woodwinds.
No, she didn't.
She went through this intense, really varied progression. She started by studying the violin and then the viola.
Which is fascinating.
Then she moved over to the piano and then the clarinet, well before she ever found her definitive voice on the tenor sax.
And, that completely explains her embouchure and her phrasing today.
How so?
Well, she didn't learn music solely through the lens of a jazz horn player who's just obsessing over Charlie Parker transcriptions. When you start your developmental years on the violin and the viola, you're basically hardwiring your brain for an acute ear for pitch and string arrangement.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
You learn a very specific type of legato and this really deep emotional sustaining.
I wonder if that string-centric beginning is exactly why her later orchestral work feels so organic. Like, it's not just a jazz player hiring a string section.
Exactly.
It's a player who actually thinks in strings.
Precisely. And then you layer the piano on top of that.
Right.
Studying piano with someone as formidable as Nikki Yeoh at Camden Music means Garcia wasn't just learning single-note melodies.
Mm-hmm.
She was internalizing the entire harmonic grid.
She sees the chordal architecture from the top down.
Right. So by the time she finally transitioned through the clarinet and onto the tenor saxophone, she wasn't just learning how to blow into a tube. She was bringing the vocabulary of a miniature orchestra into a single instrument.
Which is just a terrifyingly strong foundation. But she didn't build that foundation in total isolation.
No, the mentorship ecosystem was huge for her.
You mentioned Nikki Yeoh, which covers that intense chordal piano perspective, but the sources point to this massive dichotomy in her education.
Yeah, the two different schools of thought.
Exactly. She eventually graduates from the Trinity Laban Conservatoire, but simultaneously, she was coming up through Gary Crosby's Tomorrow's Warriors youth program.
All right.
That feels like a collision of two entirely different musical philosophies.
What's fascinating here is how that dual education perfectly armed her for the scene she was about to build. Trinity Laban represents the institutional rigor.
The classical side of things.
Right. That is the formal academic architecture. That's where you master the complex theory, the discipline, and just the sheer technical endurance required to physically command the instrument at an elite level.
But conservatoires can also churn out incredibly sterile players, right? You can master the rules, but you might end up sounding like a textbook.
Which is exactly why Tomorrow's Warriors is the crucial counterweight here. Gary Crosby's program is legendary in the UK because it actively rejects that sterility.
It's much more grassroots.
Deeply rooted in the oral tradition of jazz. It is about the hang, the community, the history, and the raw, unfiltered act of improvisation. Tomorrow's Warriors is where you learn to get off the page.
You have to learn to listen to the musicians breathing right next to you.
Exactly. You learn to speak through your horn and respond in real time. It's basically the difference between learning the grammar of a language in a quiet classroom and actually arguing passionately in that language in a crowded pub.
That tension between the conservatoire's rigid scaffolding and the oral tradition's fluid improvisation, it really set the stage for her entrance into the recording world.
It was a perfect storm.
So she puts out her debut EP in 2017 called Nubya's 5-5. It's a hard-bought project heavily rooted in those traditions she absorbed.
Yeah.
But here's a detail from the sources that just stops you in your tracks. The physical vinyl pressing for this debut jazz EP completely sold out in 24 hours.
I mean, in the modern streaming era, a jazz debut selling out physical copies that rapidly is a massive anomaly.
It's unheard of.
But if you listen to the tracks on Nubya's 5, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
It wasn't polite sit down and stroke your chin background jazz.
No, the groove was relentless.
It had a kinetic energy that demanded a physical response from you. It proved there was this massive, untapped demographic of listeners who were starving for this specific sound.
It tapped into something deeply physical. And she clearly realized that her audience wasn't just older jazz purists in seated venues.
Right, she saw the demographic shifting.
And this is where she makes a massive pivot. Just a year later, in 2018, she self-releases her next EP, When We Are.
A huge turning point.
She explicitly starts blending modern jazz with electronic and club culture, specifically incorporating broken beat. For those trying to visualize this, she is basically taking the acoustic tenor saxophone and dropping it right into the middle of a pulsing, sweaty London dance floor.
It is a brilliant, entirely necessary evolution. London has such a rich foundational club culture, from drum and bass to UK garage to dubstep.
It's all in the DNA of the city.
Exactly. And broken beat, specifically, is a very distinct, syncopated, stuttering electronic rhythm native to West London.
It's so infectious.
It is. By taking an acoustic jazz quartet and forcing them to lock into that digital feeling broken beat grid, she completely shattered the traditional boundaries of where jazz belongs.
And it changes how you have to play the horn, doesn't it? You can't just play sprawling, loose bebop lines over a broken beat track. You have to become part of the rhythm section.
Exactly. Her saxophone becomes a percussive instrument. She plays these tight, rhythmic motifs that lock in with the kick drum and the snare.
She took the music out of the quiet concert halls
And brought it into spaces where people are actually moving, dancing, and experiencing the music communally. She proved that complex, improvised music can still make you sweat.
But she wasn't orchestrating this shift all by herself in a vacuum. That same year, 2018, the London scene basically planted its flag in the ground with the release of the We Out Here compilation.
Oh, that record was monumental.
It was released on Gilles Peterson's label and curated by Shabaka Hutchings. And the podcast notes make it very clear that her prominent feature on this record was a huge milestone.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the We Out Here compilation was essentially the manifesto for the new London jazz scene.
The blueprint.
Yeah. Historically, jazz has often been marketed around the lone genius narrative. You know, the tortured soloist standing all alone under a spotlight.
Right, the Miles Davis or John Coltrane archetype.
Exactly. We Out Here completely dismantled that narrative.
It was incredibly communal. You look at the personnel on that record, and everyone is playing in everyone else's bands. It's this massive web of cross-pollination.
It was a declaration of a collective renaissance. Garcia wasn't just a solitary prodigy. She was cementing her standing at the absolute forefront of this inclusive, diverse movement.
A real community.
You had young musicians from varying diasporas bringing their specific cultural rhythms into a shared space. It wasn't about one person's ego. It was about the strength of the community pushing the entire genre forward together.
That communal strength and that deep dive into personal heritage leads us right into the defining moment of her career thus far. Her 2020 debut, full-length studio album, Source.
A masterpiece.
The podcast notes describe this as a landmark release, and it really is the moment where she stops just playing the music of her predecessors and weaves her own distinct Guyanese and Trinidadian heritage directly into her sonic identity.
Source is a sweeping, unapologetic exploration of exactly who she is. She takes the expansive spiritual jazz tradition, which is already heavily emotionally resonant, and she anchors it with the rhythms of her ancestry.
It's so powerful.
The album masterfully introduces Afro-Caribbean influences, the heavy bass of dub, and the folk dance energy of cumbia right into her sound.
I want to focus on that sonic mixture for a second because the notes highlight this specific layering. Imagine spiritual jazz saxophone layered over dub and cumbia.
It's a wild combination on paper.
It is. Dub music is all about the space, the echo, and these incredibly heavy subterranean bass lines.
Right.
And then cumbia brings this very specific, infectious, driving syncopation. When you put a culturally informed, conservatoire-trained tenor sax over that mixture, it creates a true global diaspora of sound.
And to make that fusion work without sounding like a contrived mashup, you really need a band that operates almost telepathically.
You definitely do.
The Saxophone Podcast notes make a very specific point to highlight her core recording and touring rhythm section during the Source era. You had Joe Armon-Jones on keys, Daniel Casimir on bass, and Sam Jones on drums.
That trio is the absolute engine room of her sound.
It's not just a backing band. They're equal partners in the architecture.
Absolutely.
The synergy between those four musicians provided the dynamic foundation that made Source possible. Joe Armon-Jones brings this virtuosic keyboard playing that effortlessly bridges jazz harmony and dub aesthetics.
His playing is incredible.
And then Daniel Casimir's bass lines are the anchor. They're deeply melodic, but they carry that immense heavy dub weight.
You feel it in your chest.
You really do. And Sam Jones provides a rhythmic complexity that drives the entire ensemble forward, adapting to cumbia or broken beat at a moment's notice. When you listen to Garcia play on this record, you are hearing her interact with a highly attuned ecosystem of peers.
They are breathing together,
reacting to each other's improvisations in real time.
And the broader culture recognized that brilliance immediately. Source wasn't just a niche jazz success. It earned her a Mercury Prize nomination in 2021.
Which is huge.
The Mercury Prize is arguably the most prestigious music award in the UK. It recognizes the single best album of the year across pop, rock, electronic, everything.
Right, it's not genre silo.
Exactly. For a heavily improvised jazz record rooted in Afro-Caribbean rhythms to compete at that level is a massive testament to its crossover appeal.
It proves that you don't have to dilute your cultural specificity to reach a mass audience. If anything, the deep, unapologetic specificity of her Guyanese and Trinidadian roots is exactly what made the album universally resonant.
The accolades just kept validating that approach. She takes home the Jazz FM Breakthrough Act honor. She records a phenomenal Tiny Desk concert that exposes her to a massive global audience, and she embarks on these sweeping global tours.
She was everywhere.
But if Source was about establishing her roots and defining her foundational identity, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, definitely.
Because when it came time for her sophomore album in 2024, titled Odyssey, she completely refused to repeat the formula.
She did not play it safe.
She didn't just write Source Part 2. Our notes show a massive, ambitious expanding of her canvas. She took an incredible orchestral leap.
Odyssey represents a profound evolution in her compositional ambition. While Source was deeply rooted in the heavy groove and the tight synergy of her core quartet, Odyssey is fundamentally a majestic, cinematic record.
It sounds huge.
It does. She gracefully blended her jazz foundation with lush, sweeping orchestral string arrangements, specifically integrating the Chiniki Orchestra.
Which is such a bold, risky move.
Yeah.
Taking the raw, club-adjacent, sweat-inducing energy she's known for and attempting to pair it with a full classical orchestra.
It could have easily backfired.
Historically, when jazz artists add strings, it can easily wash out the rhythm and become overly sentimental or sluggish, but she avoids that trap entirely.
Completely avoids it.
And the notes mention that deep R&B influences are flowing through this record as well, giving it a completely different, much more vocal-leaning texture.
Thematically, Odyssey is focused on self-discovery and the vastness of life's journey. When you are exploring themes that's sweeping and introspective, you need a sonic palette to match.
Right. The quartet alone might not cover that emotional ground.
The Chiniki Orchestra provides that widescreen emotion. But what is truly remarkable, and this goes all the way back to her early childhood training on the violin and viola, is that she knows exactly how to write for strings so that they don't overpower the groove.
Because she thinks like a string player.
Exactly. She doesn't lose her distinct rhythmic voice in the midst of all those lush arrangements. Her tenor saxophone remains the driving narrative thread the whole time.
And she brought some absolute heavyweight collaborators into that orchestral landscape. The notes highlight that she featured Esperanza Spalding on Odyssey.
An incredible pairing.
That is a meeting of two absolute titans of modern jazz. Both women who have completely redefined how their respective instruments function in a contemporary setting.
Absolutely.
And it's not just her own records where she's pushing the envelope. The sources mention her working on projects with the visionary Chicago drummer and producer Micaiah McCraven,
Yes.
which further expands her reach and influence outside of the UK and into the global jazz community.
Her collaborative spirit is arguably the defining trait of her career. She is continually expanding the global reach of UK jazz by working with these international luminaries.
It's a cross-cultural exchange.
But it is always a two-way street. She is bringing her specific London sensibilities, that broken beat, dub-heavy perspective, to their projects, while inviting their diverse global perspectives into her own orchestral compositions.
Speaking of monumental collaborations, we cannot look at her career without highlighting her 2023 project, London Brew.
Oh, wow, yes.
Our podcast notes emphasize this as a pivotal moment where she joined an all-star cast of UK musicians to reimagine Miles Davis's legendary album, Bitches Brew.
That is a massive undertaking.
Taking on a piece of jazz history that monolithic and filtering it through the lens of the modern London scene just proves how utterly fearless she is.
Reimagining Bitches Brew is not a task for the faint of heart. That album fundamentally fractured jazz in 1970.
It broke all the rules.
To approach it requires a deep understanding of the original work's avant-garde nature. But more importantly, the courage to push those boundaries even further, rather than just playing a polite tribute.
You can't just play a cover of Bitches Brew.
Exactly. Garcia and her peers didn't just cover the album. They extracted its spirit of radical innovation and translated it into the musical language of their own generation. They apply the rhythms of modern London to the blueprint of Miles Davis.
She honors the past, but she is never intimidated by it. So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
It's the big takeaway.
We've traced her incredible journey from a young multi-instrumentalist kid in Camden through the rigorous classical architecture of her conservatoire training and the raw grassroots mentorship of tomorrow's warriors.
We've seen her sell out hard bop vinyl in 24 hours.
She seamlessly blend broken beat club energy into acoustic jazz.
And help lead a massive communal movement with We Out Here.
We've watched her deeply weave her Guyanese and Trinidadian heritage into the massive success of Source.
And we've witnessed her take a breathtaking cinematic leap with the Trinity Orchestra on Odyssey.
Whether you are prepping for a high-stakes boardroom meeting, launching a tech startup, or just exploring a creative hobby in your garage, Garcia's career is the ultimate masterclass in authentic innovation.
It really is.
It proves that moving a medium forward doesn't mean you have to abandon the past. By doing the exhausting work to master the rules, and by fiercely, unapologetically embracing every facet of her diverse cultural heritage, she was able to rewrite the rules entirely.
This raises an important question, and it is something I want you to mull over after we wrap up today. We spent a lot of time discussing how Garcia physically brought jazz out of the static concert hall and injected it into the sweaty, pulsing communal environment of London's clubs.
That physical energy was crucial.
Her best work is defined by the real-time physical synergy of her band breathing and reacting together in the same room. As our own workspaces, collaborations, and creative outlets become increasingly digital, remote, and isolated, how do we recreate that physical club energy in our own projects?
That's tough.
Can true, groundbreaking improvisation and community-driven renaissance even happen if we aren't sharing the same air?
That is a fascinating challenge for all of us trying to build something meaningful right now, finding a way to keep that raw human connection alive in whatever we do. Thank you so much for joining us on today's deep dive into the extraordinary, barrier-breaking world of Nubya Garcia. We hope it sparks some inspiration for your own work. Until next time.